And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Susanna Massari, author, veteran medium, death doula, and ET experiencer. Susanna, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
Well, Susanna, how did this mediumship begin for you?
Everything started to break loose around the age of 9 when I had a UFO experience. And then over the years, I was getting visitations in my dream state from relatives that had just died. And then in my 20s, it reached out to having numerous dreams about being in different dimensions, out of body, being out into the universe. And then when my son was born, everything kind of went on the back burner because I was a single parent and I had a full-time job. And it wasn't until he was 18 and moved out of the house that I decided to do something about my abilities, because I just had a lifetime of experiences. And for a long time, I thought everybody was like me. I thought everybody had all of these experiences, and I would just chatter away about all kinds of stuff. And people, I don't know if people thought it was crazy or not. But so it was it was around 2001 when John Edward came out and kind of made mediumship mainstream, and I was watching the show Crossing Over. And everything that I was watching and everything that he was doing was like, I can do that. I know I can do that because I have been seeing people, and people have been come visiting. They've been visiting me. But the thing is back in the 70s, when I took an ESP class from my now husband, Tom, and back then, back in the 70s, when he was channeling, he was called a medium. So if you channeled, you were a medium. So if you weren't channeling, then you were a psychic. And that's how the division was made. And so what was happening to me, I always thought I was a psychic. And I was seeing all these things in my head, and people were visiting me in my dreams. And when people would come through, I thought I was just having psychic impressions. And looking back on it, it seems really silly. But I was stuck in this belief system of you're either this or you're that. And so when the word medium and mediumship came across with everything that was becoming mainstream with mediumship, it was like, I can do that. I've been doing it. I can do that. And so once my son left, everything just really opened up for me. In 2002, I began doing readings for people. And I took, I think it was in 2003, I took a trip to Peru um, with a small group. And we worked with an authentic shaman in Peru, and for, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And we did about 4 ayahuasca ceremonies. And then in 2006, with a smaller group with the same gentleman that I had gone to Peru with, he was just the facilitator. Uh, I don't want to say just, he was the facilitator. But in 2006, when we went to Tuva, which is the southernmost part of Russia, and so it's an independent state of Russia. And so it's also called the land of the shamans. And so we spent probably a good 3 weeks in Tuva and went to different shaman clinics. And so with these kinds of experiences, a lot of things opened up for me. And then I was still doing readings. And then, gosh, I started doing readings over 20 years ago. And when my husband and I got together, and we had dated in the 70s, But when we reconnected almost 17 years ago, um, we kind of been a good team together. And so he does his channeling and I do the mediumship. So that's kind of how it evolved.
I want to take you back to that initial UFO sighting that was probably your spiritual awakening. What happened there? And let me just add this to it before you answer. Do you think this UFO came deliberately to awaken you?
I have never not believed that there were UFOs. I always knew that they were out there. I always knew that I was temporary in this reality. And so when I had this experience of seeing this UFO, I just knew it was for me. I just knew it. And I grew up in Miami, and my parents' home was it was a home built on stilts. It was rectangle, and so it was just one level. And we had, do you know what jalousie windows are?
I don't.
Okay. In the South Pacific and a lot of the Asian countries, and especially in Florida, jalousie windows are parallel glass in a track, and in that's a window, and it has a lever that you just turn to open it up. And being in Miami at the time in the 50s and 60s, the weather was beautiful and we didn't need air conditioning. And so most of the house had these jalousie windows. And being in a house that was on stilts, my view was mid tree, I guess. Our neighborhood used to be an avocado grove before they developed it. And so all of our trees in the yard were avocado trees, and they're not very tall. And so we were probably midway. So I was sitting at a table up against, in the family room, up against right below the windows. And I was just looking out of the windows. It was nighttime. It was beautiful. And all of a sudden I saw this ball of light that was coming towards me, and it went over the house. And I thought to myself, oh, the UFO people. And I ran to my bedroom, which was just across from the family room, and I looked out the window, and this ball of light just went, and then it disappeared. There was no sound. We were not in any traffic lane for airplanes going to the airport, Miami airport. Uh, and so I just knew it was them. Not long after that, I found on my floor. Now we had Cuban tile. They were very large pieces of tile, so the entire house had this Cuban tile. And I went into my bedroom. I didn't have any rugs or anything like that. And what caught my eye in the center of the room, which was right in the center of one of these tiles, there were three like silver nuggets. And it caught my eye, and I went down and I picked them up and I said, oh, the UFO people were here last night. Like it was just natural. And since then, more towards my late teens and getting into my 20s, I started having dreams about being on on a ship, being taught about energy, showing how I was being shown the console, and how some of them used energy from their hands to navigate the console, how to move objects and things like that. Um, it, then when I moved here back to Florida from Seattle, I moved into a house, and every time I felt like I was being watched. I lived there for a year. I felt like I was being watched the entire time I was there. I was afraid that maybe a neighbor was watching me or the landlord had a camera in the house. But every time I walked out of the house, in my mind's eye, to the right of me, up in the sky, there was a permanent UFO just sitting there. Every time in or out of the house, that UFO was in the sky. And when I moved into the home I'm in now, it all stopped. And I didn't find out until probably 20 years later, that my son told me that after we moved here, that he and his friend who lived 2 houses down, they were in the driveway with their skateboards, and it was, I don't know, it was probably 10, 11 o'clock at night, something like that. And he and his friend saw a UFO fly over the neighborhood. And I live close to a naval base. And he said that right after the UFO went over the neighborhood, there were 3 probably F-16s or whatever they use chasing the UFO. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell me until like 20 years later. And to me, that was verification that the entire year in that other house and seeing the UFO up in the sky was real. And that I just feel like I have been watched over all my life.
Do you think it's possible that you were an ET prior to this incarnation?
Absolutely. I've never said that out loud, but absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any idea what type of ET?
I have known from private sessions I've had with my husband that I'm with the Pleiades. Now, another thing that has happened along the way is that in my readings over the last few years, especially since COVID, ETs have been showing up in my readings for people. There was, now this was years ago. I did a reading for a friend of Tom's and her sister when we were out in California. And we met in their hotel room where I did the reading for them. And I knew that this woman's sister had some kind of UFO experience. So during the reading, I said, "Are you connected with UFOs? Have you had any experiences with UFOs?" And she says, "Oh my God, yes." And I said, "What I'm getting is why haven't you worked with the stones?" And I said, "Do you know what that means?" And she said, "Oh my God." She said, "I had an experience of being on the ship, and they told me to take the rocks, and she lived in Arizona out in the desert, that I was to take the rocks and out into my backyard and put the rocks in a certain formation." And they were wondering why she hadn't done that. And she said, "They showed me the configuration and what I was supposed to do, but I don't remember." And I said, "You just need to go out there and do it." I said, "Just use your intuition and go out there and do it." And there were, in the reading, there were ETs, small ETs, like, this big, just a couple of feet high, that they told me that they live underground. And their purpose is to keep the energy fields of the earth working properly and making adjustments and so forth. And so that was the first inkling, really, that I had that there were ETs living underground. But in my readings, and they choose who they will come through for and with what information. It doesn't happen for everyone, but it's been happening more and more with me and my clients. And a lot of times they are given information about their planetary origin. And a lot of times we're not just, now I don't believe any of us are from here. I think we're all ETs. Um, I think that's just a given, and I think that the ETs that we're experiencing are probably our future selves. I don't know, but none of us are from here. And we're not just from one place. We're not just from one dimensional place of each planet. You can be from several different, have associations with several different planets. So the most popular planets that are coming through for people are the Pleiades, Sirius A, Sirius B, Orion, and Jupiter. Those are the most that come through.
Well, what other paranormal experiences have you had?
What I would really like people to know, and sorry, I get choked up about this, is that all of us, all of us are far more than what we believe we are. The first time this is the first time that I've had this type of experience where I was in the kitchen and I wasn't thinking about anything. I don't know what I was doing. Um, and all of a sudden, it felt like I was shot out of my body. I was still aware of my body, but I was not, and I was aware of my surroundings, but I was not here. I was out of body and out in the universe, and I was experiencing my whole self, my true self, my whole beingness. I was experiencing my whole beingness. And I can tell you without a fact that this is true for everyone, everyone, is that I had no judgment on myself. I was pure love, pure peace. My whole beingness, I could feel energetically every lifetime I have ever lived, whether it's been this reality, other dimensions, in between physical lives, everything I was encompassed in my beingness, and I was huge, and I felt timeless, and that I have always been, and that I always will be. There was no beginning, there was no end. I was just pure consciousness. I was consciousness filled with every experience that I have ever had. And then I was just like, shot back into my body and back into my mind. And it was the most extraordinary experience. It was so personal and so intimate.
What caused you to leave your body in the first
I
place?
have no idea. It was spontaneous. I have no idea. And so I can tell you that you are so much more than your personality and who you are on this earth, in this dimension, in this reality. You are far more. And the next experience I had after that, it wasn't long after that, my mother died shortly before I graduated from high school. And it took about 40 years for her to come through. And after she had been through a few times and, uh, it- we had, I felt like she was my strongest supporter. Now I had a very harsh childhood with her. Um, so there was a lot of healing that I had done throughout the decades. And so to feel her, to get an apology from her, and to know how strong of a supporter was that she was for me was paramount. And I never expected, and I've had this experience twice, and I'll only tell you about one of them because they're pretty much both the same. I was traveling on a bus with a group of middle schoolers, and it was for summer camp, and we were going someplace up in Georgia. And I was sitting up front, I was sitting by myself, and I was up against the window. And all of a sudden, I felt my mother, and I was just encompassed. It was all around me and through me. Unconditional love from her. And anyone who has experienced unconditional love knows what that feels like. It's not like any kind of love that we experience as humans. It is beyond that. And I was filled with this unconditional love, and it was just all around me. And I started to get teary, and all of a sudden, I was still in that place of feeling her love, her unconditional love. And all of a sudden, my mind did almost the same thing as it did in the kitchen. I was just like out into the universe. And I said to myself, as you know, as I was tearing up, I just want to go home. So what I believed happened is that I had a memory for that brief moment, that I had a memory of being a non-physical being, and that I just wanted to go home at that moment. So I can tell everyone, especially working as an end-of-life doula, is that we all approach death in our own way. And a lot of what we experience when, I'll use the term crossing over, when we cross over, depends a lot on our belief systems and our views and beliefs about death. And there is absolutely nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. Not about doing mediumship, not about dying, not about surviving. Your consciousness will survive after physical death. There's nothing to fear.
As a death doula, did you ever see any of your clients talk to beings shortly before transitioning?
Yes. I could usually feel people in the room with them. I had two shared death experiences. One was a woman that I had only gone to visit a couple of times, and she was at a nursing home, and she's very thin, extremely thin, and she was contorted. She had Alzheimer's, and I went in and sat on the bed next to her and held her hand, and she kept kissing my hand, and I would talk to her, and she just kept kissing my hand. And then I said I had to go. It was about 20 minutes, half an hour later, and she was blowing kisses to me, and I was blowing kisses back to her, and I left. I went back to visit her another time, and then I was called to sit vigil with her. And when I got there, her daughter-in-law was there, and I found out so much about this woman, that she was deaf. She had become deaf during her lifetime. She never made a lot of money, and so she didn't want to spend the money on hearing aids. And that she had been married twice, and one son, always had low-paying jobs, had problems with her knees, and And so I got to know her through that conversation with her daughter-in-law. And when she took her last breath, she took me with her as she crossed over. And I found myself in this beautiful field, and it was filled with all kinds of yellow flowers, bright yellow flowers, and all different kinds, and kinds that we don't even have in this reality. And there were mountains and forests, and it was just so beautiful, and the colors were so vibrant. And she was running through this field of flowers, but she was running as a 12-year-old. And I knew right at that moment that she had reverted to being 12 years old because she had a beautiful head of hair. She was in perfect health, and she had no responsibilities. And this was the woman who had great responsibilities during her life. And so it made sense to me that she would revert to 12 years old. And I knew her father was off in the distance waiting for her. He did not show himself to me. I felt his energy. I knew he was there waiting for her. And as she was running through this field, there was not a path that she was foraging by running through the flowers. And nothing happened to the flowers. She just was running through them, and the flowers were fine. Everything was upright. And uh, a- it took me a long time. This happened before COVID, and it took me a long time before I could tell this story without crying. Because it was so beautiful, and it was, well, here I go. It was so meaningful because this woman was was so giving that she took me with her on the most intimate experience of her life. And she took me with her. And I will never forget that. The second shared crossing I had was not as dramatic, um, but just as meaningful, where I had been called in to sit vigil to only for a couple of hours, so the son could take a lunch break because his father was dying. I told the son, "Give me your telephone number. We're not supposed to do this in hospice." I said, "Give me your cell phone number in case he starts to transition quickly, so I can get in touch with you." And so he gave me his phone number, and I was sitting with the man and holding his hand, and I was talking to him, and he was in an unconscious state. And I was telling him that his wife would be back. This was on a Friday, that his wife would be back on Monday, that she was in another country going to another family funeral, and that his son had just stepped out to go to lunch. And I said, gave him my name, and I said, "I'm here to sit with you and to keep you company until your father comes back." And he started transitioning right then and there. And so I called his son and I said, "You need to get back here right away." And so I was sitting with him. I contacted the hospice nurse that was in the nursing home at the time. And I said, "You need to get in here. He's passing." And he had taken his last breath. I noted the time, and it was maybe about a minute later, I felt this really strong presence standing behind me. And I thought it was the hospice nurse. And I turned around, and it was this gentleman dressed just as he was, because before I got there, they had given him a bed bath, they had shaved him, put on clean clothes, changed the sheets. I mean, he was good to go. And he was standing right behind me in the clothes that he was wearing, and I saw him walking toward the door. and he just passed right through the door. And I use this experience to explain to people how we get superstitions about opening the door and opening a window so a soul can leave. That and how sometimes we misunderstand things that we see. What I was seeing when he was walking through the door wasn't him leaving through the door. That was him walking into a different dimension, whatever dimension he was going into, or whatever reality he was going into. And that he was no longer aware of the physical room. The physical room for him did not exist. And so I think that's how maybe over time that people have come, formed this superstition about leaving the doors open and leaving the windows open, is maybe people have seen something like that. He was just walking into a different dimension, and what I was in, the reality that I was in, didn't exist for him anymore. But he was thoughtful enough to stand behind me and get my attention and experience him walking through the door. So I've had people come back and give me information after they have passed, and all of my people that I went to visit in hospice had Alzheimer's. So I received a lot of information about what they were, especially this one woman, what she was experiencing while she had Alzheimer's. Um, I had a gentleman come back. I had only seen him twice, and it was in the same day. And when I went to see him the second time, he was unconscious. And I was just talking to him and decided to give him a foot rub. And so I was rubbing his feet, and I was looking down and looking at what I was doing. And I looked up, and he was wide awake, looking at me. And I said, "Hello." And he said, "Hi." And so I pulled a chair up next to him and I started talking to him. He really wasn't talkative. And I had found out that he had owned from one of the nurses, that he had owned a construction company here in town. And I said, I just had my house renovated. And I said, it was right after the Hurricane Matthew. And I said, all the contractors just left me high and dry to go out and make money wherever, there was damage from the hurricane. And I ended up hiring 3 really incompetent people that said they could do everything. And it was just horrible. It was a nightmare. And I had to hire people to fix what they had done. But anyway, I told him that. I said, if I had known about you, I would have hired you to renovate my home. And I left, and I woke up. I woke up at 4:30 from a dream and it was a visitation from him, that he had come in. He had built me a whole new home. And in the dream, when I was walking toward him, he was in the kitchen and he was just delivering a refrigerator for me. And I handed him, and this, you have to interpret dreams, symbolically too. I handed him a check, which was my way of thanking him in the dream. Thank you so much for doing this for me. But it was definitely a visitation from him. I had called the nurse that morning, later on in the morning, and I said, "Has he passed?" And she said he passed about 10 minutes after 4. And the dream I had was 20 minutes after 4. And so he was kind enough. He was kind enough to give me a brand new home, fully constructed by him. So these things happen, they happen all the time when I was working with hospice and sitting with the dying. And I can tell you, I want to tell people that it matters how we treat people. It absolutely matters how we treat people, because everyone that you come into contact with, whether you know them or you don't know them, has someone in spirit around them and that love them and that see what's going on in their life. And I can't tell you how many times I have helped someone either at the front counter at FedEx, or um, people that I've hired to help me in the yard that I've needed to be patient with. There has always been somebody that has come back and thanked me for being kind. And so I think it's very important how we treat people and how we be patient with people and understanding when we're able to.
If we get back to ETs, did they ever give you a message for humanity?
In my book, I have a chapter of automatic writing. And so while I was writing the book, I ended doing hospice when COVID hit, because we weren't allowed to volunteer any longer. And that's when I wrote my book. It took about 3 years to write. And during those 3 years, I was receiving a lot of automatic writing and a lot of messages from ETs. And I can also tell people that a lot of ETs are people's guides. And I have a friend who, I don't, oh gosh, forgive me, people. The, oh, the, not the ant, but the praying mantis type. What do you call them?
I think they would just call
I've,
them mantis beings or something, or
yeah, I've
mantis
seen them
aliens.
twice with two different people, that they were guides for two different people, and that they were part of that family, that ET family. So in the book, I have a chapter of all automatic writing with messages about our society, about ourselves, um, how to raise consciousness. And I can't pull anything really specific at this point, but it's all about raising our consciousness, getting to a place of compassion, love, living in integrity. Now, integrity to me means taking responsibility for everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we feel, and everything that we think. It's taking responsibility for everything that we do in our life, and not to play the blame game or anything like that. And for people to raise their consciousness, the number one thing is to live in integrity. And that's what ETs look for. That is what they won't show up for someone if someone is not living in integrity. At least from my experience.
Have they ever revealed to you when we will have open disclosure and we will be invited to join the galactic family?
No, I think everything is going to have to be uh, on an individual basis, and learning about yourself, understanding your emotions, and using your imagination, your creativity. Um, it, it I think it's a tricky thing. Um, the more people raise their consciousness, the closer, in my opinion, the closer they become to having contact. Um, they want us to know that they're here. They've been here, and uh, if they have wanted to do anything nefarious, that would have been done.
Well, what tips can you give us to raise our consciousness?
It's understanding yourself, understanding your own emotions, dealing with your own traumas. Now, a lot of people have complex trauma. And if you don't know what that means, it's complex trauma is trauma from early childhood that you have may have experienced on a daily basis. It's like every day, and of getting these small traumas and just having, bits and pieces of your soul just um, annihilated. And when we don't face our own traumas, when we don't go within and face our own pain, which can be very painful, but it's more painful to drag it around your entire life. Just face it, get it over with, and integrate the experience, because once you integrate the experience, because the energy of every experience you have and every trauma that you have, it is still with you energetically. So when you can look at a trauma or an experience that has not been a good one, and you can look at that and not be emotionally affected by it, then you're pretty much on the road to having that experience integrated into your identity, and where it's not taking center stage and becoming your identity. So we become the experience, and the experience does not define us. So it's learning about consciousness. It's learning about the consciousness of every being. And my number one advice that I give to people is, number one, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And a lot of people are afraid of themselves, but do not be afraid of opening your mind and allowing experiences, these metaphysical, spiritual experiences happen to you that nobody can. This is your body. This is your life experience. And when you take responsibility for your life and you face your traumas, you face the things that cause you pain, and you integrate that, and you open yourself up, you raise your consciousness by doing that. And with mediumship and channeling, or any kind of talent that a person has, any kind of gift that a person has, is you were born into it. So authentic mediums are born into it. Authentic channels are born into it. Uh, Athletes, they're born into it. Musicians, they're born into it. Now, you can be technically good and you can play an instrument, but you may not be born into it. It may not be your drive. It may not be your passion. Um, Mediumship and psychic experiences has been with me my entire life, and it's a major part of my identity. So when something's not a major part of your identity, you might not be born into doing something. So there's nothing to fear. And especially when you start first opening up to experiences, it can be a little scary, because you have to figure out how energy is presenting itself to you. And you have to think about everything being communication. Everything you get may be communication. I woke up one night with a dark cloud over me, and I was going to, hide from it. And I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not hiding from anything. I'm not going to be afraid of all this stuff. And So I looked at this dark cloud that was, right over my body, just a few feet above me. And I just said, "What can I do for you?" And it just disappeared. And I knew I was releasing some negative energy that belonged to me. It wasn't anything that was there to scare me or do anything harmful to me. Another thing I tell people is, I ask them what would they do? What would they feel if they woke up, that if they were like turning over in their bed and they were half in and half out of sleep? And what if you rolled on your back and all of a sudden you had a dog right in your face barking? How would you react to that? What would you do? And most people in the retreats that we used to do, most people would thought of it as something negative. And I said, this happened to me. This dog was over me, was like all fours, was standing right over me with his nose. We were nose to nose, and he was barking at me. And I just thought, hello, what can I do for you? And he dropped this red ball. And I picked it up. And when I picked it up, in my mind's eye, I was in this huge field. It was probably 2 football fields put together, and there was um, forest on either side. And I took the ball and I threw it, and it went down the entire 2 football fields, and this dog was running after it. And then it just, the vision disappeared, and I thought, well, that was pretty cool. Some dog saw my energy and was attracted to it and wanted me to play. And I was trying to get back to sleep, and all of a sudden there was a man standing next to my bed, and I knew it was his companion, the dog's companion, and he was just surprised that that whole thing happened. And I just mentally, telepathically said to him, "You have a really cool dog. Thank you so much." And he left. So, raising your consciousness, if you want ET contact, raising your consciousness is key. And it's all about the person personally raising their consciousness. I don't think we're ever going to, at least not in my lifetime, ever see a UFO land on the White House lawn. I would love to see it. I would love to see it.
You have a book out called Living Beyond Death. What is the main takeaway someone should get from reading it?
It tells you how to, it's like a guide telling you, guiding you to raise your consciousness. I go into a lot of my personal history in the beginning. I talk about the art of death. There's a chapter called The Art of Death. I talk about doula work, how to prepare for your own death, what you need to do and what papers you need to have. And so you have complete autonomy over your own body and how you want to die. So that's all very laid out information on what to do. There's a chapter in what a doula actually does. Some of my favorite chapters, and I think the longest chapter I have is on animal consciousness. Now, it's also my personal belief that I believe animals have a much higher consciousness than we do, and we could learn from animals to help us raise our own consciousness. So that's an amazing chapter. I also have a chapter that's one of my favorites is dreams, dimensions, and imagination. And so the dream chapter, I go into dreaming, interpreting your dreams and using your dreams and being able to go into different dimensions while we're dreaming. using your imagination, your creativity. I have a chapter on personal stories that people have about visitations, and which is really interesting. There's a lot of interesting stories. And I have the automatic writing chapter. I basically wrote the book for my grandchildren so they would be able to know me on a deeper level when I'm not here and they're older. But it's basically a guide to life and what the afterlife is like, and what I have seen as a medium, and the information that I have been given as a medium from people who have crossed over and that I know that have come back, from people that I sat with at Vigil for, and people that have come through in readings, and they tell me what their death was like and what they're doing on the other side.
Well, if people want to find out more about you and what you're up to, should they go to a website?
Mediumunplugged.com. I also have a YouTube channel, and just search YouTube for Susanna Massari. Everything that I have posted on YouTube is also on my husband Tom's YouTube channel also. And the book is available on Amazon or any kind of like Barnes and Noble, and it's like 21 different places you can get it, but it's mostly more popular on Amazon. Kindle is $4.99, I think.
Sue, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
You are more than you think you are. You have people that love you. You're on the right track, even if you feel broken and lost. You are on the right track. This is the life that you have created and designed for yourself. You have put forth a lot of challenges for yourself, for you to grow. It's all about evolving, and we evolve through our experiences in life and how we greet these experiences and how we react to them. You are fine. You're beautiful. You're loved. And you'll be okay. And you will survive physical death. Guaranteed.
Sue, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.